When has a gut feeling saved your life? Serious. I almost got kidnapped once. I was like 23 or so. I was walking down my street at a little after dusk. I saw a van approaching a little ahead. No lights on. Didn't think much of it due to the time of day. The van slowed down and almost started creeping. As I was approaching this part of the sidewalk which had a tall solid wall fence to a community. This gave me some pause in that quick moment. For me to keep walking, I'd have to go between the wall and the van. In the little time it took me to take a couple of steps. And as the van was getting close, I noticed that the side door was slowly sliding open. The one thought in my mind was, why isn't the light turning on inside the van? When you open the door of a vehicle, the light should come on inside it. Unless you deliberately switch that off. And I just ran to the median. I ran in front of the van and across the street. Because if they're gonna have some use of roadkill me, have at it. But they're not getting me in one glorious piece. Immediately, the van took off like someone lit it on fire. From a slow crawl to full speed. As I looked after it to see the plates, I noticed it had no plates. And still no lights. I called the police. Of course. They sent cars out and didn't find the van. I never had anything like this happen again and I'm just an ordinary person. So I don't suspect it was targeted. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Always hated the dad scout leader in my area growing up. Just seemed like a real creep. Hated seeing him at community events, soccer games, back to school nights, etc. 10-year-old me staged a hissy fit to end all meltdowns with me slamming doors, crying and breaking ***** to avoid being moved from Cub Scouts where the moms ran things to avoid Boy Scouts. Turns out the scout leader was molesting 3 or 4 of the boys in the troop and threatening to kill them if they ever spoke. Justice found him and he's in prison. I get really bad vibes from the car park in work. It's a giant, poorly lit multi-story and I've seen enough horror films to know I shouldn't be taking it lightly. Whenever I get in, I pay attention to the floors people call the lift to keep an eye on where they're going. One time a guy got in front of me and pressed 6. While I was parked on 8. He didn't get out at 6. And was still in the lift as I got to my floor. I leave. He doesn't. So I guess he's remembered he's on another floor. But just before I get to the dark area with all the cars, I turned back. This guy had waited about 30 seconds, therefore held the lift to wait, and silently emerged to follow me. I just stopped and stared him down. He had a deer in the headlights look and turned straight back to the lift. I have no idea if it saved my life, but it freaked me the ***** out. Listen to my body. Twice. I started having painful period-like cramps. So I made an appointment with my ob-gyn the next day. They immediately gave me an ultrasound and discovered a grapefruit-sized tumor where my ovaries should have been. Certain it was cancer. I was in surgery days later. Thankfully all the cancer was encapsulated in the tumor. So no chemo was necessary. I did have to go on an estrogen patch though. A year later, I was sitting in my bathtub and reached out for a towel. Felt a weird pain in my left breast. I knew it was cancer. I immediately pulled off the estrogen patch and then went in for a mammogram first thing the next morning. A few days later, I was having a bilateral mastectomy and reconstruction, which I had insisted on because it was my second cancer diagnosis. The 2 cancers were unrelated. My doc wanted me to have a lumpectomy and radiation. But I insisted that I never again wanted to have to tell my daughters that I had cancer. After my surgery, my tumor was tested and it was determined to be highly recurrent and aggressive. Even though the cancer had not spread into my lymph nodes, I went through 20 rounds of harsh chemo in the hopes it will never, ever come back. Thankful to say that on April 20, 2020, I will celebrate being cancer-free for 5 years. Edit. My first award ever. Thank you fine giver O Silver. I was driving a friend home late at night when I was around 21. She lived in a pretty rural area outside of St. Louis. Mo, and about a quarter mile from her house was an old abandoned farm and farmhouse. I always thought of this place as non-threatening as she told me she and her 2 sisters would go there as kids and they found an attic full of cool things, including a trunk of vintage woman's clothing and old love letters. Like something out of a movie. Anyway, I'm driving her home and it's a hot, humid Missouri summer and we have the windows open as the late night had offered some cool air. We are also singing at the top of our lungs. We pass the abandoned farm and I drop her off at her house. I wait long enough to see she makes it inside and I head back out the way I came. I'm driving along and I get to almost where the farm is and I see two things in the road. My danger meter goes off as I had just driven this road and there was nothing there. I put the windows up and make sure the doors are locked. I get closer and I realize the items are two car batteries. Spaced out in the road, which was basically a one-lane road, in a way that I would have to get out and move them to drive on the road. I immediately knew I wasn't getting out of the car, so I picked the side of the road that had the lesser ditch and I gunned it. I was driving a little SUV and remember feeling the car run over branches and things in the little ditch. But I just gunned it and got out of there. All the way home I felt creeped out and kept checking my rear view mirror. I called my friend the next morning and told her what had happened and we both agreed it was weird. Shortly after that I moved to another state and didn't think much of it after that. Fast forward to 2 to 3 years later when I was back visiting my hometown. I randomly ran into my old friend and she ran up to me with wide eyes and grabbed my arms. She asked me if I remembered what I told her that night. I said yes and she proceeded to tell me that not too long after that had happened her family was awakened in the middle of the night to someone pounding on their sliding glass door. Her dad went to check and saw two naked, injured women and let them in and called 911. They had been abducted from St. Louis City, about 40 minutes away, by two men and brought to the old, abandoned farmhouse where the men tortured and raped them. The women somehow managed to get free and ran to the only light they could see. The light over my friend's garage. They survived. But the men were never caught. There was evidence the men had been going there for a while. My friend was convinced they had put the batteries in the road to lure me out of the car. I'm just really glad my gut told me not to. Edit. Grammar.